Justin Trudeau has finally resigned. And boom, we are live. What's up, everybody? Couple Casuals Podcast, episode number 52. I'm your host, Stefano. And guys, it's the first episode of 2025. I want to wish everybody nothing but the best for this year. A big happy new year to start us off. And I hope 2024 served you exactly as it should have. I hope you learned a lot of lessons. I hope you had a lot of good times. And hopefully you can carry a lot of that positive, good energy into 2025. Because guys, there is so much happening. Starting off, coming out the gate, we got a solo episode here today with me and my buddy Dean on the mic there.
What's up, boys?
Let's go. We got a pretty interesting episode for you guys today. A lot is happening in Canada, in the West, in the world. Coming out the gate of 2025, you got LA that's in flames, pretty much. It's pretty fucked up. Dean, I know you probably saw that. That's pretty
Some crazy stuff coming out of LA right now. All the Palisades are just completely gone.
Yeah, that's crazy. Literally insane, which maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. There's censorship, I think, might be finally dying slowly, and we might be making a comeback for free speech. There's some interesting things that Mark Zuckerberg had to say, and a lot of other good, interesting things. But the main thing, guys, something happened in Canada coming out the gate in 2025. Like I said, we're starting off hot, guys. Justin Trudeau has finally resigned. Now, some people say it would have been better for him to just ride it out and get absolutely destroyed in an election, which basically every pre-polling and analytics that you can get has said that. But I don't know, there's something interesting about him resigning, and there is definitely a rejuvenized Canada. There is a wave of change that's happening in 2025, especially in the West. So much is happening. We're going to have a political conversation because there's just a lot to talk about in politics today. And you know what? We need an episode dedicated to politics. So just coming out the gate, on Monday, January 6th, Justin Trudeau finally resigned. And not only did that happen on January 6th, Dean, I know you definitely saw this, but also, you know what else happened?
What's that?
Trump was officially certified by Kamala Harris.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
That was interesting, bro. Like, Kamala Harris, they have her there, and she's having to certify Trump as the president. So on January 6th, not only did that happen, but then also Trudeau resigned. So it was a very interesting day coming out the gate. But change is prevalent across the West, and it's very, very evident. But just opening thoughts, Dean. What are your thoughts on Trudeau resigning, bro?
I mean, it was inevitable. I think, yeah, like you said, he was no chance he's going to get reelected. No chance the Liberal Party was going to get reelected. So, you know, I think for him, the best move for him visually was to resign. And then when the election is inevitably lost, it takes less blame. He takes less blame, and it'll go on whoever replaces him in the Liberal Party as the leader.
Yep.
Which, I mean, I'm sure you've already seen. It's a clown show. It looks like,
it
looks like a circus. They're all completely incompetent. So, for him, I think it was the right move to resign. For the country, it's still going to be a shit show for the next few months.
There's so much work that needs to be done, Dean. And everything that you sort of just said, it encapsulates the sort of the vision of the podcast today. We're going to talk about his resignation speech. We're going to talk about why and how this happened. We're going to talk about what does this mean for Canada. We're going to talk about how the media, Canadian citizens, everybody involved sort of enabled Trudeau and the Liberal Party, because we have to remember one thing, guys. There's Trudeau, who was the leader, who was the head of the snake, so to speak. But the Liberal Party is not much difference, Dean. They're the same, but different.
Same people.
Different costumes. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the difference in the Liberals and Conservatives for Canada, because we're going to an election soon. And I think that Canadians need to really have a deep down thoughts on what they want this country to look like. And as you said, there's so much work that needs to be done. And we're going to talk about what Trudeau did, how he affected everything. And we're going to talk about Pierre Poilievre. We got to talk about him a little bit. And then what's next for Canada? We're going to figure out what the hell is next for Canada. So let's start with the resignation speech. Did you see it?
Yeah, I watched it on TV. Yeah.
Dude, I don't know.
Embarrassing.
Yeah, it's just, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of COVID a little bit. It reminded me of he used to come out and give you some new restriction or some bullshit that you weren't allowed to do, or some mandate that he's putting on. But he came out, he walked out, I don't know where he was, his house, the cottage, wherever it was. But the tone was regarding self. It's very narcissistic sort of way of speaking, and how he delivered the speech. Even the speech was such a dramatized and typical liberal Trudeau fake good person politician
Yeah.
statement saying he fought for you. He
Yeah.
fought for you, Dean, the
And
Canadian
climate
citizen,
change
and
yeah.
climate change. So some of the things he listed, let's list through some of the claims, and then we'll kind of critique them a little bit. His claims were he strengthened the middle class, he protected us through the pandemic, he advanced reconciliation, he stood strong with Ukraine and democracy, and he fought climate change and got the economy ready for the future. So I don't know. What the hell do you think about that, bro?
I mean, it's hard to hold back the laughter, even listening to you read back the points that he mentioned. It's laughable. I mean,
what?
anybody with a brain can see that all of those. It's almost like, is this opposite day? I texted my friend, is this opposite day? This guy's full of shit. He's completely opposite.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm an idiot, guys. I don't know. You guys are the listeners. You guys decide on whether you take this information, like as a Canadian citizens, for the Canadian people looking, you take this information and you evaluate the past 9 years that we've had Trudeau in office, and you determine, what do you think? Do you think these points are correct? Because I look at this, strengthen the middle class. I don't know. Last I checked, people can't even afford groceries. The middle class is somewhat disintegrating right in front of us. There's so much that we can unpack there in the middle class. Protected us through the pandemic. He forced people to get vaccines that they didn't want to get. He destroyed the country by printing so much money through the pandemic and implemented measures and engaged with division that we've never seen in this country.
Froze bank accounts.
Froze bank accounts. Let's not forget that. That's a great point during the truckers' convoy. Well, that's just an interesting point too, because you see some protests that are happening nowadays, and how they're destroying, saying death to Canada, this, that, and the third. Nothing happens.
No.
You get a couple of truckers, families dancing around some campfires in Ottawa, and Trudeau literally implements the Emergencies Act. So I don't know how that sort of lines up. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you know, Dean. I don't fucking know what the hell's going on there. It doesn't make any sense to me, but he didn't really protect us through the pandemic. I don't think so at all. If anything, we were the most divided we've possibly ever been. Brothers and sisters stopped talking to each other. Friends and family started arguing with each other over whether they wanted to get vaccinated, whether they wanted to wear a mask, whether they wanted to do this with their children. They got involved in the government, and other people got involved in individuals' lives like we've never seen before, which we can talk about that left, right, and center. He advanced reconciliation. That was an interesting one because I think I remember on the day of reconciliation, if I'm not mistaken, and Dean, you might remember this, he actually took a vacation day. Do you remember that?
I don't remember, but that's par for the course.
So
that makes sense,
I think if I could don't quote me on it, or this is a podcast, we get to speak freely, and then you guys can determine whether it's right or wrong. But he implemented a day called it was for awareness of reconciliation, right? For Indigenous people,
Right, okay.
And that exact day he was vacationing.
I think I remember that now.
So,
yeah.
So I don't know how that
The
lines
guy's
up.
a clown.
It
He's
just
a clown.
doesn't make any sense, right? Yeah. He stood strong with Ukraine and our democracy. The democracy, I don't believe it at all. Maybe he gave millions of dollars to Ukraine, but Canadian people are lined up at food banks, and we're struggling. There are a lot of people are struggling, and the middle class is disintegrating right in front of us. To fight climate change and get the economy ready for the future, we know that everything is about climate change. I'm sure the LA fires are about climate change.
That's what they're blaming him on. Yeah.
Yeah, but did you see what Trump said to Gavin Newsom? But
Yeah.
Well, what did you see? Maybe I'll get your
Well, I
point
mean,
on that.
Trump was on Rogan, obviously, a huge famous episode. Everybody knows about that. But he was talking to Rogan about how, like in California, there's so much resistance to opening up water lines from the north,
Yes.
from the water flowing into California, so that they can deal with these issues that they're having with forest fires and maintaining the forest. You got to have control of burns. You got to do a lot of stuff to maintain massive amounts of woodland like they have in California. And no, we're just going to devalue. They defunded a lot of the fire departments.
Yes.
They put a lot of DEI in ahead
implemented
of that
DEI.
shit.
There's a very famous clip going around right now of like the assistant fire chief, and it's a very interesting for anybody
It's
watching.
embarrassing.
Check
Even the
that out.
mayor is a moron. Like, of course, I don't know much about L.A. California politics, but the L.A. mayor is a moron. She was in Ghana on vacation while the forest fires were happening.
Yes.
I saw an interview where like a journalist was trying to ask her these questions, like, do you think it was right for you to leave California in the midst of you
She didn't even
warnings?
answer. She froze.
Zero answers, froze as if he wasn't even speaking to her. That's embarrassing.
Yeah.
If you're a politician, at least have some kind of an excuse or an answer or something. To not say anything is so indicative of the level of skill.
There's
that
no
she has.
accountability, right?
Yeah,
And then you
zero.
look at the other side, Governor DeSantis.
Yeah.
Ron Sanctimonious, as Trump said. His nicknames are very funny. he was talking to some reporter, and basically he was saying about when things happen in Florida, natural disasters, first thing people do is they politicize it, media included, right? In particular, the media, they politicize everything. So, Gavin Newsom is saying, as Trump says, Gavin Newscum was saying that Trump has politicized this. But what he's doing is he's trying to urge voters and American citizens to have a look and go, where's the accountability? Because like you said, they didn't want to get the water. It was a very environmental issue. I think it was.
They blame it on to save a fish. Now
smelt or something like that.
Exactly.
Was it?
Yeah. The smelt fish. Yeah. So, which is, I don't know how important that fucking fish is to
I think people's lives are more important.
Yeah, exactly. The whole entire Palisades burning down because you wanted to maybe save this fish from having to deal with whatever the fucking problem was going to be. I think what Trump was saying on Rogan, it's far more likely it's an economic thing. The right people weren't getting the right kind of payoffs, and that's why those water lines were, or there's like financial incentives. There's no way they give a fuck that much about a fish.
100%. And most of the time, like Trump on that podcast too, and for anybody listening, definitely recommend that. But he also talks about the bureaucry and the sort of like speed bumps when he was doing building permits.
You need consultants and blah, blah, blah.
A lot of them were environmental claims of like, we can't do this because there's this frog that's sitting right there.
Unless you pay us to consult on how to work around the frog and blah, 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 blah. It's so
corrupt. And we're going to talk a little bit about consultants. Like federal government increased the consultants. They talked about it. A lot of the data I took a lot of data from Jordan Peterson and Pierre Poilievre's conversation. I definitely recommend it for anybody listening. They talked a lot about Canada and the future of Canada. It sort of paired up well with what happened with Trudeau's resignation. It was released shortly before that happened. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about how and why this happened. This happened basically because Trudeau is, I think, one of the most disliked prime ministers in the history of Canada. He's despised and he's a very dishonest political leader. There's many accounts for that, many evidence of that, very ethics violations, and et cetera, which we'll get into. But Canadians were literally bombarding him on the street. Like, up until most recently, Dean, I don't know if you saw these videos, but like people are going up to him and basically freaking out in just dissatisfaction of his leadership.
The worst part about it is his shit-eating grin as they're telling him to fuck off or like, you killed my grandma, whatever the claim was. His shit-eating grin about like, have a nice day, have a nice day. You enjoy your day too, sir. No reflection on the possibility that he could be wrong about something. Very narcissistic and disgusting.
Yeah, like we were saying about the resignation speech. Everything was about him. Yeah. I fought for you. Yeah. I fought for you, Canadians, and I did it from the beginning. Like anybody with any sense can know that wasn't the case, and he's disingenuous. Yeah. And that's
my favorite part was actually when somebody asked him, "What's your biggest regret about your 9 years?" And his biggest regret is he couldn't change the way that prime ministers were elected. Not, I fucked up with COVID. A lot of people died. They shouldn't have.
I didn't even see that. Are you serious?
Yeah, near the end, I think one of the reporters said, "What's your biggest regret?" It's hilarious because he says basically that he wasn't able to change the way that the next prime minister gets elected. Some bullshit. Who knows what the fuck? But that's your biggest regret? You presided over the worst,
9
thing
years
that happened in this country over the fucking last 100 years, and that's your biggest regret? You couldn't figure out how to make it whatever for the next prime minister to get elected? What a goof.
Yeah, it's just I think his attempt to they wanted to sort of adjust elections and stuff like that to change some things, and he wasn't successful in that. But his approval rating went to an all-time low, falling to 22%.
I can't believe it's 22. I thought I was going to say like 12.
I know, and then actually I pulled up the top 4 worst approval ratings in history, and he was second on the list. So Brian Mulroney came in at 12% in November of 1992. I think he implemented like the GST. There was a lot going on at that time. Based on a little bit of information that I pulled up, year 92, that's the year I was born. Shout out to 92 crew. Second, Justin Trudeau, 22% in December of 2024. So that was most recently. Third was Stephen Harper at 23% in May of 2013. And 4 was none other than Pierre Trudeau at 25% in September of 1982. So a couple interesting facts there in regards to his very all-time low approval rating, which, like you said, Dean, I thought it would have been even lower, to be honest with you. Yeah. But his own cabinet was turning on him, and his own internal liberal support fell to 16%. That was very, very low. A lot of his own cabinet was turning against him, and all of these, which we'll get into more points, it's kind of led to why he had pretty much no choice to resign. But his deputy prime minister, Chrystia Freeland, decided to literally quit the same day that she was supposed to deliver the fall budget that actually contained a massive deficit overrun. So there was it was a very important day, and she actually resigned on that day, which a lot of people are speculating that she may make a run for it on Prime Minister. What do you think? The Wicked Witch of the West?
I mean, she can try, but no fucking chance.
I don't think so. She can't. It's sort of like the Kamala Harris thing where you can't sort of disconnect yourself from Biden. She can't really disconnect herself.
People are going to remember what she did and what she said. She was involved with a lot of that trucker stuff. She was giving a lot of these speeches, especially
she froze
during
the
that
bank
time.
accounts.
Exactly. So people are not going to disconnect her from the disaster of the last 9 years.
And I hope they don't, because
I hope she runs, because that would be a beautiful candidate for the Conservative Party to go up against, because there's not a snowball's chance in hell she's got of getting,
I don't know how they close the gap in regard in general with approval ratings being so low and like people's discontent.
They'll never. They have no hope for winning for it. I think we're going to probably have Pierre for like another 10 years.
I hope so, because we've had Trudeau for 9. We need a conservative leadership to come and clean this stuff up. But
for sure.
But she was very close with Trudeau, and she resigned on that day. That was a very interesting thing. Many of the interesting things that sort of unraveled in the build-up to Trudeau inevitably having to resign. Most importantly, this is how this happened. All opposing parties were committed to a non-confidence vote that would have led to Trudeau's resignation anyway, and the Governor General would have had to call an election. So basically, when Jagmeet Singh, the individual of the NDP party, the leader of the NDP party, arguably worse than Trudeau, many people might say, was propping up the Liberal government for a very long time. And I don't know really what he was getting in exchange for propping up the Liberal Party, other than maybe crossing the finish line to achieve his pension, which critics say that's what it is. But other people say he would have got it anyway. I'm not exactly sure, nor do I care. What I'm looking at is the fact that he propped up this Liberal government for this long, then literally came out and said, I'm done with Trudeau. The Liberals are done. I am not going to support them anymore. And like weeks later, supported in confidence of them when Pierre pushed the non-confidence vote. But as of recently, Jagmeet Singh committed that he's going to finally commit to a non-confidence vote. So that's sort of what happened there. Do you have any thoughts on Jagmeet, Dean?
I think it's exactly what you said there. I think it was literally all for money. Like the guy is, what do they call him? A Maserati Marxist?
That was so funny.
It's hilarious.
Oh,
these nicknames that are coming out of politics because of Trump are gold.
Yes.
But I think he's a scumbag. When I look in his eyes when he's speaking, I don't think he gives a shit about anything but himself.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And I think
sometimes you can just tell. And
he's a fake tough guy.
He's a fake tough guy. Fake. Did you see him like running up to people are giving him shit on the street after he gets out of
he's challenging to fight them.
Yeah, he's like chesting up to them and like, say it to my face, bro. Like, you're supposed to be a leader of one of the Canadian parties, like the 3 parties in Canada, and you're acting like a tough guy like that. You're nothing but a scumbag to me. I think it's all for money. I think he could have ended this a long time ago, but he, like you said, I think it's literally for his pension, because he gets a couple $1 million a year for the rest of his life now.
Yeah, and he's getting it in February, by the way, for everybody that's not aware of that. So there's definitely a self-interest there, which most socialists, that's usually what happens there. But yeah, I don't know what his deal of the bargain was. Like Jordan and Pierre sort of talked about this on their podcast. It wasn't really clear on what he was getting on his end. Like,
what did Pierre say? Like, only Jagmeet could go into a meeting and come out with nothing. Like,
yeah, exactly. I mean? What really did he achieve from that? He propped up the Liberal government, and that's what kept them in power. Exactly, with the minority government. So finally, when all parties committed to a non-confidence, I think that was the last straw, so to speak. Because when it initially was put forward, the bloc sort of was trying to sort something out, so they were going to keep the government active, and then finally Jagmeet rather committed to a non-confidence, and that's what sort of led us, because it would have went to an election anyways. And Canadian Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre have staggering national support, around 44 to 49%. So that's a huge federal support, showing that the good guys are winning for 2025. A lot happening coming up soon. You got Trump, who's going to take office on the 20th of January, and we're going to be in an election probably very soon, which we'll talk about right now. So what does this mean? What does this mean for Canadians, guys? All these things happening. Justin Trudeau has resigned. The Liberal Party is going to have to elect a new leader. And apparently it's going to be done by March 9th. I don't know 100%, but we will see about that. There was an original scheduled election for this year anyways of October of 2025. But the election will likely be sooner, with the Liberal Party being forced to select a new leader to take over. But this is the important part that I want everybody to understand. And you sort of alluded to it at the beginning of this conversation, Dean. You can't separate the rest of the Liberal Party from Trudeau. So no matter who they put there, whoever it is, guys, it's not going to be the fix. The Liberal Party is taken over by this radical left liberals. These aren't real liberals, okay? And we'll talk more about who they are and what they represent as kind of the conversation continues. But whoever they put in there, guys, it's Trudeau 2.0. It's the same guy in a different costume, okay? They all supported him. They all gave their vote of confidence for him. They kept him in power. They only now have come to the conclusion that we need to get a new leader because their polling numbers are so bad, because their national support is so bad. And now it's convenient for them to go hold up Canadians and find a new leader to try to retain power some way, shape, or form. So guys, when you're going to the polls, it's your right to vote. It's your right to choose who you want. But keep in mind, you're voting for Trudeau again. Anybody that you vote for in that Liberal Party, you're voting for Trudeau again. That Liberal Party needs to be dismantled, and some reasonable Liberals need to come and take over, because that's what they need to do in order for the success to come back. We need reason, and the Liberals don't represent that at all. Let's remember, their party is full of activists. Like, you look at Stephen Guilbeault. Do you know who this guy is? The environmental minister? Yeah. So he's literally an activist.
Yeah.
He has a past of, like, he climbed the CN Tower at one point. He had all these, like, climate. I urge people to go search this up. Stephen Guilbeault had literally criminal charges of, like, mischief and whatever else it was, but he had these acts of sort of similar to what you see these environmentalists sort of blocking roads and throwing paint on Michelangelo's art and stuff like that. Don't know what they achieved from that. But this guy's cut from that cloth, and he is a part of the federal government. You have activists that are running the country of Canada. So what are we doing here? Now we know why. You look at the numbers, you look at everything on where Canada is today, and there's your reason. So look up Stephen Guilbeault. I very much encourage people to do that. So what else does this mean? Parliament is scheduled to return on March 23rd, but a new spending bill is actually supposed to be sorted by March 31st, day after my birthday, for anybody wondering. So that's an interesting thing that's going to be on the corner. They will likely have to set a day for an election, and the predictions are, I don't know what you know about this, Dean, but it looks like it might be in April or May. Are you familiar with, like, how it sort of looked for Canadians?
I heard some rumors and stuff like that. I'm not 100% sure how they can trigger that and make it a specific date that we're going to know now. But I think, like, once Parliament opens up again and, like, they're all back to, I can't believe they're, like, stopped till March. That's insane. But
yeah,
I think it's going to be ASAP. Like, as soon as possible, the election's going to get triggered. I think even Jagmeet can't hold it back now. I don't think even his constituency agrees with it. So as soon as that guy gets his pension, I think you can expect an election within a few weeks of that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's going to happen. That's the speculation. That's what it seems. Anyways, of course, there's a scheduled election for the October 2025, but it's highly unlikely that that's what's going to happen.
No
My
way.
prediction, it's springtime.
Yeah.
Canadians, we're going to the polls, and guys, remember, your vote matters. So make sure you get out there and vote. But yeah, it's even if the Parliament opens up, there's opposition days, right?
Yeah.
So I think Pierre has like 25 or 30 opposition days. So they would have an opposition day. They'll trigger a non-confidence vote, and they'll pretty much go to the election, because that's likely what's going to happen. So we'll see what happens with that. But guys, remember, whoever you vote for, you're still voting for Trudeau. So this election is going to be huge for Canada. Let's change it. 2025 is a year of change. Let's make a change. Let's do something different here. There's a lot happening in Canada, and we need to change it to a positive mentality, because a lot of people want to leave this country and they want to go to the United States. Why? Let's make Canada great again. Let's make people want to live here. Let's incentivize businesses. Let's control our immigration. Let's do these things that are going to get Canadians thriving again, which we're going to talk more points about that. But let's talk about enabling Trudeau and the Liberals. How much have Canadians enabled this guy, Trudeau and his radical left Liberals? Because that's what they are. They're not liberals, Dean. They're socialists.
Yeah.
They're radical socialists disguised as liberals.
Yep.
But what is a liberal? What is a classic liberal to you?
I mean, it's not even that long ago. I'm only 35, 36. And, like, when I was, 20s, like, the Liberal Party was, like, the obvious choice. They were pro-choice. Okay, I agree with that. Everybody, your body, your choice for everything.
Proponents of freedom of speech as well.
Freedom of speech. It was what you classically think a liberal is, which is what a lot of people are still clinging to. They imagine that conservative equals racist. It equals rich people get all the incentives and poor people get poorer. It's hilarious, because the Conservative Party of today is the Liberal Party of 20 years ago, 15 years ago, even 15 years ago. It's completely flipped, even in the States, too. It's not just Canada. Everywhere. The States, the Republican Party is the liberal, is the what are they called? Democrats from 20 years ago.
Yes,
It's completely flipped.
You raise a really good point, and I urge people to kind of look into this. But the establishment is sort of burning in front of us. I think like the age of establishment politicians, guys, is somewhat coming to an end. You look at guys like Trump, and you look at guys in his he's basically elected a lot of entrepreneurs as part of his cabinet, etc. I don't know if Pierre would be able to do the same thing in Canada. I don't think he could. Imagine he elects like Jordan Peterson for this.
Yeah, I don't
fucking
think that's
Kevin
gonna
O'Leary
happen,
for
but-
this. Like, imagine.
But he has access to them, and he has input
Yes.
from them. So that's all that really matters. I don't think Donald Trump's going to put, Elon Musk in the White House with an official position, but he's got access to him. So if he has a question about something, he can ask the smartest guy on the planet.
Why
right now.
not?
Yeah, of course.
People like the media loves to run with that. But yeah, it's a good point. The establishment is burning in front of us. The new age of politics is sort of compelling and very interesting for young people in particular. And that's why, like your point, conservatives, Republicans aren't the classic rich white guy smoking a cigar laughing at how people are losing money. And like that's that in my, at least what I think. I don't think that's really what I think. It's small government. I think the mission's pretty clear.
Yeah.
They want to incentivize the free market. They want to stimulate the free market, and they believe in the sovereign individual. That's why I support conservatives. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll figure it out, but we'll see what happens this year. But we enabled Trudeau for a long time. The media allowed it, in particular. The state-funded media like CBC allowed Trudeau and the Liberals to continue. Only recently, pushing back. It was only recently that we finally would see in question periods and in these sort of interviews and pushback opportunities where Trudeau was finally getting pushback. He was finally getting, the Liberals were finally getting questioned and trying to at least attempt for the account of their accountability, because it wasn't existent up to this point. But recently when Trudeau resigned, there were some interesting, the media some media still supported, still was very supportive of him, and very interesting on how they were kind of going about their support and their headlines. I don't know if you saw this, Dean, but did you see some of these Toronto Star headlines?
Like what? Which ones?
Oh my God.
I try to stay away from that shit. 'Cause
Yeah,
it just makes me mad.
I saw it online, and Trudeau resigned. This is one of them, right? Justin Trudeau has quit. Will his legacy he built survive?
Christ. Yeah, that's
That's one by the Toronto Star. Once great Toronto Star, and now liberal propaganda machine. Don't know what happened to them, but yeah. This is another one by Toronto Star. Say what you want about Justin Trudeau, there's still no arguing Canadians became wealthier while he was in power.
I saw that one.
Trudeau's successors will be hard pressed to improve on his economic track record. Well, I don't know where they're getting this information from. Like I don't know.
I think it's financial interests. I think it's like, it's handshake deals. All that kind of shit is real. That stuff happens. All that stuff behind the scenes. You can get headlines like that for certain incentives. Who knows if they're getting extra money for the paper from the federal government. And so like, it's not always like, it's like the pharmaceutical stuff. It's not always like, you better say this or we're not going to do this. It's no, the federal government gives you $20 million for 2024. We can't shit talk them, because then we might not get it again. And also that's where our money came from. Like we can't,
You know what's interesting? Like 2 points on that. Like one is the CBC is state funded, right? So they're funded by the Liberals right now. But if the Conservatives were to get in power, are they still state funded by the Conservatives?
They are. They're funded by the federal government. But the difference is, guys like Pierre, they don't want to blow a couple $100 million on the CBC. For what? It's a propaganda machine. And he realizes that. But he's also smart enough to realize the internet's better anyways. So we can stop wasting taxpayer money on shit that nobody even cares about. And that's one of his major things is defund the CBC, like bring them down to almost nothing.
Yeah.
If they can't self-sustain to a certain extent, why do we have government-funded media? That's insane, right?
Yeah, that's insane. That is very odd.
It's odd. So it's not
separate.
full propaganda like we're in Russia, but it should not. They should not. Their primary source of income should not be the federal government. Otherwise, the incentive is to prop up the federal government.
That's the thing, and then that's my second point is let's call it a spade. If like the testament that the economy and that people in Canada, they're not wealthier than they've ever been and they're not doing well, which we'll run through some data. If that's factually incorrect, how can a media proponent like the Toronto Star say that with no accountability. Like, I don't understand how that works. I'd like to live in a world where like you have to speak truth, especially the media. I know that's very far-fetched, but maybe that's why podcasts and alternate sources of media are doing so well. I don't know, but we'll talk more about that in the censorship coming up very shortly too. But how else we enabled Trudeau? I don't know if you remember, Dean, but there was millions of dollars that were invested during September 20th of 2021 when he implemented a snap election, trying to get a majority government. That was another thing that sort of happened. He didn't care. The Liberals are saying now, well, Canadians don't want to go to an election right now. You know when they didn't want to go to an election was during COVID, when you spent millions of more dollars to fund this election because you saw an opportunity, Trudeau being you, saw an opportunity to possibly get a majority government because other provinces in Canada, I think, implemented snap elections during that time and they actually achieved from a minority, they went to a majority. He saw that and he tried to do that on a federal level. So that was freaking interesting. It's too bad that during that time Canadians didn't show up and vote blue but our leader wasn't exactly.
He was giving away free money, so a lot of people were ready to keep him.
Yeah, and the lines were massive too. There was all those rules with COVID, so people saw the lines, they turned around and left. It was crazy. But other ways we enabled them was the corruption from the other parties propping them up, or their own self-interest, trying to keep them going. And it took time, but now Canada and the U.S. are ready for change. 2025, there's a mandate for change. Do you feel that? Do you feel like this 2025, there's a mandate for change across the West?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we saw it with Donald Trump in the United States, and it's going to be the same thing in Canada. It's going to be a landslide for the Canadian Conservative Party. It's going to be a joke. It's probably going to be one of the biggest landslides in Canadian history in terms of politics. I don't even know a friend like that was so gung-ho during COVID about vaccines and they're double boosted. Not a single one of them give a fuck about the Liberal Party and Trudeau and like boosting, like they're all voting conservative. So even if the most liberal guys on the planet are now ready to vote conservative. So
it's the time for change, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that across the way, and there's a reason why. It's the pendulum, right? If it swings this way, it's at the left. Now it's swinging right back because there's good reason for it, which we'll cover some more metrics as we continue here. But it took time, but we're ready for change, and I look forward to it. January 20th, Trump's in power, and then we'll go to an election. So we're very close from Canada and the U.S. being led by what seems to be on the forefront. We'll see how by reasonable people. We'll see what we know what Trump's capable of. We'll see what Pierre can do because there's a lot of critics saying he's absolutely done nothing so far. So we'll talk a little bit about Pierre kind of coming up. But what I want to talk about now is, in addition to this being a time for change, we're moving away from, there's a real feeling that we're moving away from wokeness. We're moving away from cancel culture. We're moving away from censorship, control on speech, big government. A lot of people that were apolitical, that weren't interested in politics, are really starting to get interested in politics. During the recent election in the United States, a lot of people were apolitical, independents, voted for Trump because things that are happening are triggering their interest, and then they're looking into it. They're reasonable people that are seeing this is not what I'm voting for, and they're voting the other side of the aisle, which happens to be conservative. And I think the same thing's happening in Canada, which we're going to see it very soon. But in regards to speech, we were just mentioning a little bit before pod about Mark Zuckerberg. Let's talk about that a little bit. This is in addition to like the end of wokeness and how things are sort of changing and reasonable people are prevailing and reason overall is becoming paramount again. But Mark Zuckerberg, well, 2 points. One, he was on Rogan, but even before that, Dean, I don't know if you saw, but he released a clip. Yeah. So for people that don't know, I definitely urge you go and look this up. But Mark Zuckerberg released a clip on how he's going to remove fact checkers from Meta. So up until recently, fact checkers were some liberals at their kitchen table drinking Starbucks, just determining what's right and what's wrong. Who knows what they were? What is? They're determining something's a fact, but it's not. Like especially through COVID, you saw that millions of times, and he referenced that too. But in this video, he basically says we're at a time where free speech is becoming more warranted and needs to be at the forefront again. So he's sort of in a way admitting to his faults with Facebook, Instagram, and Meta as a whole. And then he's also saying, I'm willing to take accountability for these errors and I'm going to remove fact checkers and we're going to go to community notes similar to the way X has it. So talk on that video a bit. Dean, what did you think about it?
So I saw the original video that he posted on Instagram as a reel, and then I saw his podcast with Rogan, and my opinion of Zuckerberg is even lower than it was before.
Really?
He's just a sniveling snake, and he sees the tides have turned and that X is doing extraordinarily well since Elon bought it, and because of that, because of the free speech and the community notes, and it's a place people have smartened up to the fact that the Hunter Biden laptop story was a disaster on Facebook, all the COVID misinformation. So now he's sort of like playing like it's not my problem, it wasn't my fault. Like the federal government was pressuring us, and on Rogan he talks about how the federal government would call his team and yell and scream at them to remove stuff, and
the Biden administration, for the people that don't know this, the Biden administration would call Mark Zuckerberg and his team at Meta and basically urge them to take down posts. Some of them that were true. For example, natural immunity was basically a scientific fact for up until that point. They wanted them to remove or hinder that growth of natural immunity because they wanted to urge people to take the vaccine. Anything opposing the vaccine or any information about the safety of the vaccine must be taken down. Even to the point where there was like a Leonardo DiCaprio meme. They made them take that down. They were so involved with Meta and the censorship during that time that it's now finally at the point where Mark Zuckerberg is having to come out and basically state that for the prosperity of his business. And that's a good point, Dean. Is Mark Zuckerberg authentic to what are his values? Because he seems to sway with the wind. Because if he truly believed in freedom of speech during that time, wouldn't he have held down the fort?
Yeah, he owns one of the biggest platforms on the planet. When you combine Instagram and Facebook and WhatsApp, he's got the most numbers on the planet probably of any platform. If he had any balls, he would have said, "Fuck you! No way! We're not taking about anything down. We're a platform that is going to allow people out there and they can have a discussion." That's what this is. They can post something, you can post something, and then all your family and friends can argue with you about it. And that's totally how democracy works. Yes. It's the only way you get the truth. You don't get the truth by listening to Fauci, one guy at the top. You get his information, and then other doctors, and it's not like they're censoring me and you, some guys who have nothing to do with the medical field. They were censoring doctors, scientists, really smart people that should have been listened to. They were censoring them because the financial incentives of the vaccine were top position of the play, and that means censoring people that are fostering quote unquote vaccine hesitancy. So.
Yeah. The interesting thing is during that time, so many people were so divided on these subjects, and they would reference people as conspiracy theorists in result of censoring from these platforms. So it actually the whole really runs deep with Biden's involvement, and it's sort of America sets the tone for everybody else. So it was more of an international issue because everybody uses Meta, Instagram, and Facebook and stuff like that. But their involvement is somewhat criminal, bro. Yeah. And then the way the push that they had on the vaccine, we know that better than anybody. We weren't allowed to do anything. We weren't allowed to travel. We weren't allowed to work.
One of the worst countries.
Yeah, one of the worst countries was Canada, and it held for the longest.
Yeah.
So it was really amazing to see. But yeah, Mark is now finally coming on the other side of the coin and saying we're gonna go back to freedom of speech, which some people don't forgive him, and then other people look at it and they go, well, it's about time you sort of came around. Which now that's what we're seeing. I think that's running across more than just social medias. I think that's running in families' homes, at their dinner tables, these conversations. The opportunity for speech is growing, and that's exactly what we need. Let's talk a little bit about liberals and conservatives, because Canada has a big choice coming up right now, and Trudeau and the Liberals have destroyed this country. So one of the things in result of them destroying this country and bringing us to where we're at right now is everybody wants to leave. Everybody wants to go to the United States. Everybody wants to leave Canada. They don't want to be in Canada anymore. There's no room in Canada. I want to leave Canada. And let's sort of unpack the U.S. versus Canada statistics. Over the past decade, you'll find this interesting too, D. Yeah. Over the past decade, Ontario's per capita GDP has declined to the extent that residents are now poorer than those of Mississippi, the poorest state in the United States. So let's run that back one more time. The GDP in Ontario has declined to the extent that the residents in Ontario are now poorer than those of Mississippi, the poorest state in the United States. Can you believe that, Dean?
Of course, yeah.
God.
I mean, I've seen it just with my friend group and people that I know, friends of friends. If you have a successful business, you're capped at 10% of your potential if you stay in Canada. To open up that extra 90%, you got to go to the U.S. where there's a lot more free trade, and the marketplace is bigger. We need to get that back in Canada. Otherwise, all of our great entrepreneurs are just going to flee south.
That's exactly right. And
we'll fall apart.
that's what we need to do, is get it back into Canada, because historically Canada's wealth tracked close to the US, but now it stands approximately 60% of the Americans' wealth.
Yeah.
On average, Canadian and American incomes were tied. I think this was a New York Times article from quite years back. But Canadians were slightly better off 10 years ago. 10 years ago it was. But now per Canada, the GDP in the US is 22K higher than it is in Canada, and that's in USD. So that's 30K. That's another like part-time salary, which I got this from the Jordan Peterson episode. I thought that was insane.
Yeah.
So at one point we were tracking just on par with the US. Some would say a little bit better, but now the GDP is in the US $22,000 on average, higher than it is in Canada.
One point to highlight is you said about 10 years ago, Trudeau's been in office for 9.
Oh my God, that's
so
true.
everybody aligns those two times.
Just so everybody understands the timelines and how that sort of worked. The Canadian dollar. The Canadian dollar is a significant decline, trading at 1.4350 CAD per 1 USD. So for every dollar that we put in on for every Canadian dollar that you put in, you need to put $1.44 in change to get $1 back. So it's one of the lowest. I don't know if I have any data on that, but
it's the lowest in my lifetime. I think one of the lowest times.
It's one of the lowest. It's really bad. So if anybody has U.S. money, now's your time to probably cash in on that. But that's just a reflection, like, on where we're at, right?
Yeah. The inflation, all the stuff that they did during COVID.
That's sort of what happens there. The real estate in Canada, everybody talks about this, is one of the reasons why people want to go to the United States. They look at how many times do you see it on Instagram? Oh, bro, did you see this house in Texas? It's like $435,000. If you had to buy that here in Toronto, it'd be like $4.2 million or $1.4 million or $2.4 million, whatever it may be. The comparison's different. So another reason why people are like, I want to go to the States. I can't afford to live here. How am I going to raise my family? But we'll talk about it a little bit more at the end of the podcast. But I think I want to hope, and I want to be optimistic that Canada is eligible to make a comeback. I really want to believe in this country because I love this country and I think it's a great country, and we were once a great country, and politics actually matters. And I think that people are starting to really realize that politics matters because it has an effect on you, your family, your bank accounts, everything. So speaking of effects, let's talk about Trudeau's affected areas of concern. This is going to be a big one, and then we're sort of going to wrap it up. But Trudeau's affected areas of concern: crime and safety. He implemented Bill C-75 and Bill C-5, repealing mandatory jail time, the bail rules, restructuring the way our legal system is set up in the name of equity. Just some of the worst things that you want to do. And now the crime and safety of our streets are of big concern. It's one of the reasons why people are getting more interested in politics. The division amongst Canadians, we know that so much. The scandals, the Wee scandal amongst apparently 60 other deans, 60 scandals that this guy has been a part of.
Yep.
The censorship, Bill C-11 and Bill C-18, some of the censorship that he put through, the handling of COVID-19, which we talked about. The radically increased money in federal bureaucracy, 40% in bodies, and increased money in federal consultants. Can you believe that's almost a 50% increase?
Yeah, it's
in consultants that apparently are like $600 an hour, or like the money that they're investing with your tax-paying money. It's absolutely insane. The deficit at a reported almost $62 billion, exceeded the initial projection of $40 billion. So quite an increase there. The deficit is the difference between what it spends versus what we bring in. So we're quite high on that 62 billion almost of 2024. That's quite insane, guys. The inflation is extremely high under Trudeau. The groceries, production costs, serving prices, very high. Let's talk about taxes a little bit. How many people are upset about their taxes? They look at their paycheck and they go, where the hell did all my money go? Well, your income tax is high. Your payroll tax is high. And then even outside of that, the carbon tax is extremely high. The capital gains tax is extremely high. The high business taxes are extremely high. Everybody is taxed for everything. So not only are you taxed on your income significantly, when you get the money that you finally make that's taken from the state with whatever you're left over, you got that little bean left, you go to the store to buy something, you're taxed how many times over, Dean? Crazy amount, right? Yeah. So for somebody who makes $100K a year, you're taxed 26%. That's just to give everybody an example. Like it's edging quite close to the 50% mark, even for people making fucking 100K a year. Immigration, how bad is this one, right? The population growth, we had a population growth of 1.2, almost 1.3 million in 2023. Take that in. There's 40 million people that live in Canada.
Yep.
We had an increase in 2023 of 1.3 million people.
Yeah, that's just in 1 year.
And it's just in one, that is just in 1 year. And you know where they're all going? Toronto, Vancouver.
Yeah, the big cities, the big
The big cities. So what's happening to us in Toronto, guys? You guys are upset about your traffic. You're upset about the infrastructure that can't sustain the amount of people coming in. That's Trudeau. You guys upset that the job markets are flooded, the investment opportunities are destroyed, the housing economy, the housing and infrastructure can't keep up with the amount of people. That's your buddy Trudeau. Yeah. What are your thoughts on these immigrations and the increase, man?
I think we've seen it in the States. You know, as Canadians, we get a lot of our news about the States, front and center. But it's the same thing playing over here. The Democrats were importing immigrants illegally and shipping them to swing states. Why? Not by coincidence. They're giving them free plane tickets.
Yes.
They want them to settle there, and they want them to vote for them for the next decade.
So you think that Trudeau was doing the same thing?
He's buying votes for the Liberal Party for the next decade, and it's not going to work because it's caught up, and people are not able to afford homes. Food is too expensive. There's, traffic's insane. The healthcare. That's
another thing people don't talk. You have 1.3 million people increase in 2023. What do you think happens to the healthcare system?
Yeah, and they're not importing doctors and lawyers. They're importing low-skilled labor jobs, Uber drivers, people who are quote-unquote students. They're studying for like hospitality, and they just want to be Canadian
citizens. They just stay here. They're on a student visa, and they stay here. The system is very flawed.
Exactly.
That it's really like taken advantage of.
It's not going to work. They're going back on that. So that's why you even see some of these guys from India. They're protesting, like you said, we could come here, we could stay here, blah blah blah, and they're backpedaling on that because the economy can't handle it. The infrastructure cannot handle it. The healthcare system. I think it's good that we give away free healthcare, but you can't import 4 million people in 4 years and expect the healthcare system to sustain that.
Yes,
it can't.
You can't. It's too stressed, and then for the tax-paying citizen who pays for that, we're not exactly getting the healthcare that we should deserve because it's just overwhelmed. The problem isn't immigration. The problem is the increments that we're not engaging with versus just flooding people in here. 1.3 million people. You can't move. There's just too many people. The job market's getting hit. The housing market. There's nowhere to live. Yeah. The housing market, the healthcare system. But even Trudeau walked that back when he initially would call everybody racist, whatever you want to call it, when they would critique his immigration policies. Xenophobic, whatever name you want to give. He even walked it back. And I think one of the reasons was Trump's threat on tariffs. He said, one of the first things he said, you guys got to get your border in order, okay? Yeah. Or else I'm going to be putting these tariffs on. And what did Trudeau do? They started investing more money and getting the border in order. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
Just insane. Now, before we wrap it up here, let's talk a little bit about conservatives because we critique Trudeau and we listed all those many things that he did that he's done that's so bad in these 9 years, which all you need to do is just open your eyes and you'll pretty much see it. But let's talk a little bit about the opposing side, about conservatives and what they possibly bring to the table. So Pierre is doing extremely well by all measures. His memberships are extremely high. His fundraising and polling data is doing very well. His mission, again, I took this from the conversation with JP and him. His aim is to restore the Canadian promise, ensuring that hard work leads to good pay and pension, home ownership, and safe neighborhoods, plus small government. So that's sort of what we alluded to before. That is something I can resonate with. Now, a lot of people critique, I don't know, I'll give you a second here if you want to sort of talk about Pierre for a second, but a lot of people critique Pierre. He's like, what did he do yet? Is he going to keep his promises? So what are your thoughts?
I think the alternative is so bad. I would rather elect my cat than another Liberal. So if he did the worst job of any conservative in history, he would still do better than another 4 years of the Liberal government. So.
And the other thing that we need to remember too is that the system is so clogged with this bureaucracy, these lobbyists, with these still like liberal individual progressives, whatever you want to call them, that it's going to take a lot of work. It's not like he's going to get in there and then like, boom.
Yeah, it's not a dictatorship. You can't just start swinging the sword and cut everything apart. It'll probably take at least 2 years, 3 years before you see a massive increase in the GDP of Canada. But that's listen, my advice, invest in the Canadian energy sector. That the boom of energy money that's going to come into this country because we don't have some fake climate change fucking activist in power anymore is going to be crazy. Like I can see all of that stuff booming in Canada, and that goes directly south to our richest neighbor, richest country in the world, United States. They have plenty of money to buy our energy. We should be selling it to them. I think that's going to be big. I think the whole country is just going to improve in every aspect over the next 5 to 10 years.
I'm of the same opinion, and I hope we're right. Now, you mentioned resources and things that we have. Let's talk a little bit about that. I wrote some notes here. We have the 3rd biggest supply of oil, the 5th biggest supply of natural gas, the biggest supply of uranium, the 5th biggest supply of lithium, and we're basically 4 coasts of tidewater like surrounding us. So quite a bit of incentive to invest into Canada, but like you said, we got to fucking change some of the legislation. We got to stimulate the oil and gas industry. So that leads me to the points of Pierre's promise. And let's start with the first one here. You mentioned about investing in the energy systems and the energy market. His plan is to repeal C-69, which is the anti-energy law, and make it attractive for businesses to do value-added work in this country. So that's one of them. Another thing he wants to do is restore the oil and gas industry. So that's one of the ways you'll do that. I'm sure there'll be a lot of investing and cutting of spending in order to do that. He wants smaller government, cut the bureaucracy, cut the foreign aid funding, cut corporate welfare to large corporations. He wants to use the savings to bring down the deficit and taxes and unleash free enterprise into the system. He wants to repeal C-69, which we talked about. He wants to restore the oil and gas industry, which we talked about. He wants to cut government spending. He's going to axe the carbon tax. Pretty much he ran on that for a long time. And he's going to stop the money printing, because that's something that's happening significantly, especially during COVID. It happened a tremendous amount. And he's going to incentivize, this was an interesting one in regards to housing, incentivize the municipalities to speed up the permits and cut development charges and free up the land, or the municipalities will lose their federal infrastructure money. And he also wants to remove the federal GST on new homes. So that's a gist of it, of some of his ideas to sort of stimulate the economy. But like you said, your cat would do a better job than Trudeau was doing right now.
My cat is not financially motivated, to have an extra tax. Like that carbon tax is going to lower the cost of everything.
It's going to immediately lower the cost, because you got to think, people that don't understand, your groceries that come in are brought on a truck that needs fuel, that costs money. Your house that needs to be heated costs money. Like across the board, what that price on pollution, what is that do? What is that actually doing?
Nothing. We still have the biggest deficit. So you're collecting more tax than ever because of this carbon tax, and we still have the biggest deficit in this country's history, $60 billion.
That's 62 billion.
50% over what your guardrail was.
Exactly.
Insane.
Yeah, and there was supposed to be a ceiling of 41 million, but that doesn't obviously exist.
No.
But just everybody, just as we kind of wrap up here, guys, we need to really think about what we want as the future of Canada. Okay, we need to think about how politics matters. We need to think about what life do we want to leave for our kids, because the life that we have now and the things that are going on right now, I don't know if it's the best plan forward, because it doesn't seem like it. If people are in droves going to states like Florida, they're going to states like Texas, they're going to the United States of America, what is going to happen to Canada? Okay, there's all these threats of Trump making Canada the 51st state, which is, I think, somewhat comedic. How serious do you think he's about that?
I think if he could make it happen, he would make it happen. He knows there's no chance it's going to happen, but he's using it as Trump likes to, it's annoying when you're a Canadian and you hear that, but he's using it as a negotiation tactic. Like, hey, this isn't off the table that we just take over your country, or like, not militarily, but we can put pressure on your government. If you don't play ball and you don't stop the people, a lot of those immigrants that come to Canada legally fled Canada and went to the United States illegally. You know what I mean? There's TikToks. That's one of his points. Yeah. So that's what he wants to stop. He wants to stop that. That's his biggest thing. And then also he says he's subsidizing the Canadian, all that financial stuff. I don't buy it, that we're gaining over $200 billion every year from the U.S.
Yeah, that's what he says. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't buy it. I think he's doing his negotiation thing. And the only reason he's saying stuff like that is because we've had such a weak leader for the last 10 years. He sees the opportunity. He hasn't met Pierre yet. He hasn't had to deal with him yet.
He probably doesn't even know who he is yet.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you what, I am very interested to see how they pair up together.
Yeah.
Pierre Poilievre and Trump. I'm very interested to see how they pair up together. My prediction, and then quickly I'll toss it to you, Dean, what your prediction is on how they pair it together, is one or two things. It's either going to be very, very contentious and they're going to go head to head, have like some sort of alpha male battle. I don't recommend Pierre do that. Or they're going to get along tremendously and do good business. What do you think?
I think they're going to do good business. I think Pierre's not an idiot. He understands the man that Donald Trump is. And to go head to head with them and start, calling names and doing, that's not the way you do it. First of all, you're supposed to be a politician. That's not how you do it anyways. But I think he has more opportunity to make real business deals with Donald Trump that Donald Trump would appreciate and understand. And he's going to close. He wants the same thing as Donald Trump for this country. And he wants, they should want good things for both of us. Both leaders should want good things for Canada and the U.S. on both sides.
I hope so. I'm optimistic. I think 2025 is good. But what's next for Canada? Guys, what's next for Canada is we're going to save this country and we're going to reestablish Canadian pride. We got to bring back the pride for Canada. I have a viral clip on my Instagram where we're talking about I was asking the guest, is he proud to be Canadian? Are we proud? I often ask guests that. I often ask them, are you proud to be Canadian? Because I am proud to be Canadian. I'm proud to be Italian. I'm proud to be Canadian. But this country is a beautiful country. We're rich in resources, like we just said. We're good, kind people. And we need to reestablish that pride in Canada. And maybe right now, we're not exactly too proud to be Canadian, and that's fair. But that can change. And that I think it all starts from the top. And unfortunately, politics matters, and that's where it's going to change. So how do we reestablish that pride in Canada? We make changes. The changes have already been implemented in the United States. Canadians need to do the same. We're going to hit the election box, and we're going to hit it hard. It's time to change. It's time to give the opportunity to the boys in blue to figure out if we can get this country back. It's going to take time. We're going to need to stay politically motivated, politically engaged, because the swamp and the establishment is still very prevalent in Canada. But we got to reestablish that Canadian pride, because Canadians are good people, and we need to get that Canadian pride back, and that's how we're going to do it. We're going to do it at the voting box, and then we're going to do it amongst us Canadians. We're going to reestablish our pride in Canada. We're a beautiful, rich country. And even in Toronto, Dean, like the pride in Toronto has been diminished, because it's such a liberal city that people are upset with the way things are going.
Yeah.
But I'm proud to be from Toronto too. Why wouldn't you want to be proud where you're from, guys? Why wouldn't you want to be proud from where you're from? You want to be proud. You want to be proud of Canada, of Toronto, of where you live. When you go other places, people ask you where you're from. You could say I'm from Canada. You can say you're from Canada. You could say you're from Toronto. You could say it with conviction. You could say it with pride. And we're going to do that. 2025 is the year of change. So with that being said, guys, I want to thank you guys. I want to wish you guys nothing but the best in the year of 2025. I pray for nothing but good stuff this year, good news for everybody, and wealth and prosperity. So to end us off with the final segment of Couple Casual Podcast, which we call Salute, I will end this off with a very big salute. Salute to change, to new opportunities, and to growth. So we're going to do this, and we're going to do it together. Let's reestablish the Canadian pride. I love you guys, nobody else. Dean, I appreciate you too. Let's keep the fight going. Let's keep the fight going, bro.
Absolutely. We'll be here.
We'll be here. Until next time, guys. I love you, nobody else. Ciao.